G'day homebrewers, thanks for tuning in. This is Jeff. Welcome to another 15 minutes in the brewery. Today we're going to be talking about this particular beer, and I'm also going to be giving you an update regarding my keg issue and my issue with infection. So just a quick update about that and just things that have happened in the last week. But first of all, I want to get into this beer because I want to actually talk about the beer itself, and I want to talk about potentially brewing a beer like this, but I can't. Where's my bottle opener? Hang on, I've got to find a bottle opener. All right, got the bottle opener. So what we got is Bishop's Finger. Bishop's Finger is brewed by Shepherd Neame in Faversham, Kent, UK. It is called a Kentish strong ale, and from what I've read on the back, it is a protected geographic origin or something like that. So it's like champagne, I guess. So you can't brew a beer and call it a Kentish strong ale unless you're in Kent. That's what I'm assuming. Anyway, I have no idea, to be honest. But all right. So the first thing about this beer is I think it's actually a predominantly a cask ale. It's quite low carbonation in the bottle. It's 5.4%. It is essentially like a red ale, and it's a malty ale. Let's put it that way. I think a few of you brewers out there who love your English styles and your maltier ales are going to love a beer like this, especially you, Finn Rue. If you don't know who he is, check him out, Finn Rue. Get the light on so you can see. Beautiful beer, clear as crystal. It's got a nice kind of amber to red, probably a little bit more amber, probably red to amber. So I'd say it's probably more amber than red. On the nose, for me, this beer immediately reminds me of golden syrup. Like straight up golden syrup. Like if I had a beer that was brewed with golden syrup, that had golden syrup as the aroma, this would be the beer. Like it's, and I think they brew it with, they don't brew it with golden syrup. They don't actually talk about the recipe so much as they give you some tasting notes. So it's supposed to be chestnut brown. I guess so. I don't know what chestnut brown looks like, but it's a reddish brown. The aroma would be roast, toffee, and berries. And the taste is rich, fruity, and bitter. And also the carbonation is quite light. So the mouthfeel is going to be quite light. Actually, strike that. The mouthfeel is actually about medium. Sorry, the mouthfeel is not light. Just the carbonation is light. And I'm assuming, again, this is probably a cask ale. So in the UK, they probably serve this predominantly on cask. Hence why it's much lower carbonation. But I don't mind beers like that. I quite like it. It's sweet, but it's not cloyingly sweet. And my goodness, if this beer doesn't remind me of golden syrup, like I would get a spoon into my CSR's an Australian brand, golden syrup, and I would eat that stuff by the spoon. I remember as a kid, my mum used to make us golden syrup sandwiches. So we'd literally have, that's our spastic cat, we literally have, she'd butter some bread, then she'd pour golden syrup over the top, and we'd eat that. So golden syrup on bread, fresh bread. Beautiful, really nice golden syrup sandwiches. You should try it. So golden syrup is kind of midway through the sugar refining process. You know, you start with your sugar. Oh, they got a name for it. It's like the liquid, and they make the molasses, and I think a step down or two steps down is golden syrup. It's still quite thick. It's that kind of color, definitely that color, very thick, beautiful. But not overly sweet. Interestingly, golden syrup doesn't seem that overly sweet to me. And then further down the track, you get your raw sugar, or your demerara, your raw sugar, and then your white sugar. So, but I think they get this aroma from the crystal malt. They have to. I don't think they would put golden syrup in this beer. I just don't think they do. This award-winning beer from Britain's oldest brewer takes its name from, oh, that's no much use here, a perennial favourite since its launch back in 1958. Bishop's Finger is brewed using Kentish hops, barley, and chalk-filtered mineral water drawn from the well beneath Shepherd Neame's Faversham Brewery. So they don't mention sugars on there. They just literally mention barley, water, and Kent hops. So in Kent, I think, is the centre of hop growing in the UK. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, so beautiful beer. Like, if I brewed this as a keg beer, I'd probably push the carbonation up a little bit. But otherwise, oh, spectacular, so nice. And it's 5.4%. You don't even think it's 5.4%. The medium mouthfeel, the sweetness is not cloying, not even slightly cloying. The bitterness, I'm guessing around 25 IBUs probably. And it has a dry finish. Like, you get that sweetness to start with when you put it in your mouth. You get that sweetness, and then you get the bitterness, and then it dries out, just dries right out. And you want to keep going back, and you keep going back, and you keep going. I could drink several of these. Such a nice beer. So I'm going to think about how to brew that. How would you brew that beer? Obviously, I'm going to start with like a British base malt and crystal. I'm assuming just dark crystal. Thinking of toffee flavors, probably. I've got some crisp Crystal 240 and Crystal 400, maybe a mixture of both, and just base malt, I'd guess. And then probably a reasonable attenuation. Yeah. I don't pick up any SO4. You know, SO4 has that little bit of bit of lactic kind of sour note, that little sour note in the background SO4 has. I don't get that at all. I get like a bready malt, and bready malt, rich bready malt, and like a toffee golden syrup, which is strikingly like golden syrup. Anyway, that's a beer to think about, that I'm going to think about brewing. I'm also going to brew Finroo's Tide Bastard. That's on my list. I was researching his recipe the other day, and I'm going to have a go at that myself. I don't mind these kind of beers. I quite like them. So yeah, so now moving on. That's the first half of this 15 minutes, and hopefully that's not already 10 minutes. So as far as my sanitation goes, so in my last video I talked about the issues I was having with, the two issues I had with the keg blocking. And an update on that keg blockage is I'm probably not going to be able to salvage any of it. It's just too far gone. I think there's too much astringency has gotten into the beer. Even though the keg now is flowing, oh, it's just mouth puckering when you drink it. It's just that bad. So sadly, I think I'm just going to have to tip it. Just dump it, take it as a lesson learnt, and move on. So what I've actually done, and did I actually bring them in? All right, give me a second. With the magic of video editing, you'll see I got this. So what this is just a silicone hose, 10mm ID. I think it's 13mm OD or 15mm. I'm not sure, but it's 10mm. It's a 10mm internal diameter silicone hose. And on the end of it, I've got a stainless steel reducer, which is a 10mm to 6mm, I believe, and it drops it down to 6mm. I've got a small section of 6mm silicone hose, and then I've got this filter. Now this is just a stainless steel filter that you would use in a floating pickup system. I've obviously taken the ball off, and instead of drawing beer through this way into a floating pickup, I'm now pushing beer down this silicone hose out the bottom and through this filter into the keg. Now I actually used this morning. I transferred the pale ale I had in the fridge, which is replacing the one that got all the hops in it. Now before I started the transfer, I opened the racking cane and I kind of drained the first little bit into a container. There was some muck in that. And when it ran clear, I stopped it, connected the hose, dropped the hose carefully. And this was obviously in sanitizer. I had this in a sanitizer bucket, and I dropped this carefully into the keg without disturbing the CO2 in the keg too much, and ran the beer down through, and the beer came out this filter. Now at the end of the transfer, yeah, I had hops in this particular filter at the bottom. There was quite a fair bit of hops in the bottom, and a little bit, like really fine particulate made it into the keg so far, but nothing like the last keg. So this afternoon I had it in the fermenting fridge, with the fermenting fridge on. I had a CO2 tank connected to it at 30 psi just to try and quick carb. I had a little sample tonight. It poured perfectly, no astringency. The flavors are not exactly what I was hoping for, but that's just a hop issue, like just a hop quality issue, or my hop choices at the moment. Nothing to do with the actual transfer or the fermentation or anything like that. So otherwise, beer poured perfectly. So that's that particular solution. Hopefully I can keep using that, and that's going to work nicely as it did today. Now the other thing I was going to talk about was the sanitation issue I had with getting a bad batch of beer. Now I talked about that extensively in the last video. I'm not going to go back over that. But what is interesting is after I went through that, and actually after I made that video too, I was digging down through all my stuff down here. And I've got my sanitation equipment down here in a container. I've got, my star sand, cleaners. I've got some iodophore brushes, things like that you would use for sanitation. Now I forgot that I bought these, but I didn't actually realize, but pushed up into the back, I found these. And this is funny because I actually have two completely full and unused containers of Stella Sand, which is idiotic, and I can't actually remember when I bought these. That's even more idiotic. So here I was thinking that I didn't have a huge supply of Stella Sand, and I was conserving it. Now I always conserve my Stella Sand. I make a batch, I use it a few times, and then I tip it. So I'll clean a fermenter, sanitize it, put it back in the bucket, clean a keg, sanitize it, put it back in the bucket. And I do that 5, 6, 7 times, and then the batch gets tipped. I've been trying to make sure that every month that batch gets tipped, so I don't keep a batch of sanitizer for more than a month. And Kegland actually says that with their Stella Sand that it's perfectly fine to keep it and keep using it. You can check it with a pH meter to make sure it's effective, but I've been trying to limit myself to a certain number or a time frame. So if I make a batch on the 14th, the next month on the 14th, I'm going to tip it and start again, because usually I'm only sanitizing 5, 6 or 7 things in that time, maybe 3 kegs, maybe the fermenter twice. And those things have been cleaned, so it's not like the sanitizer comes into contact with filth. It's going into clean vessels and just sanitizing them. So, but then I found those stuffed up the back, and I actually can't remember when I bought them, so I don't even know how old they are. Which brings on the next question I have. Can those things last forever? And I actually don't think Stella Sand does last forever. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. And I'm pretty sure even the acids that we buy from the homebrew suppliers actually start to degrade over time, which I found out last week when I was brewing a beer, the second beer I brewed since I've had all these issues. And the issue I had with that beer brew on the weekend was the amount of acid I had put in according to the Brew and Water spreadsheet was 3 mils of phosphoric acid. It was 96% phosphoric acid. I put 3 mils in our water, which should have brought the pH down to about 5.3 or about 5.35. And I know from experience with our water, I usually have to add about half to 1 mil extra to get it down to 5.2. I measured that pH at 45 minutes because I was curious, I don't always measure it. I haven't actually measured my pH for months, but I started to this time just because I was curious, because another issue's been going on in the background. That's just a little bit of flabbiness in my beers and a little bit of lack of zest, so to speak, especially in hoppy beers. So I measured the pH, and lo and behold, it was 5.6 at 45 minutes into the mash, which shocked me. I was like, what? So I calibrated the pH meter. Calibrated perfectly, put it back in, 5.65. So I actually ended up putting 2 ml extra of that phosphoric acid in. And then by this time I got to the boil. I took a sample, it went to boiling, started the boil. It went to the boiling wort at the start of the boil. I let that acid kind of mix into the boiling wort for about 5 or 10 minutes. Took another sample. I checked that, it was 5.34, I think it was. So I put 1 more ml of phosphoric acid in just to make sure. No dramas if it goes a little bit below 5.2, really not a problem at all. It was going to be a hoppy beer. It was also a beer that's dry hopped, so it's going to push the pH back up again. So it's not a problem. But I was very surprised. I ended up doubling the amount of phosphoric acid. So I think my phosphoric acid, which is probably about 18 months to 2 years old now, is actually starting to degrade. So that's another question about sanitizers. Because I save my sanitizer, I don't go through the bottles as quickly as a lot of people do. My sanitizer is probably degrading, so that's probably another issue I need to look at. So it's just another thing to think about in the brewery, I guess. If you do save your sanitizer, if you're not using it that much, or getting through those 1 litre bottles that quickly, maybe you should. And I'm thinking that myself now. Maybe I should just be not saving my sanitizer, just bloody hell, I need to get through this stuff because it's potentially degrading. And if I start mixing it at the rate that it says on the bottle, I could find myself actually having sanitizer, which is actually not sanitary. So, and I could end up with more brewing problems as a result. So, want to avoid the infections. I want to avoid any of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to speed up. I'm not going to save my sanitizer as much now. I'm probably going to save it every fortnight, tip it, do a new batch. And I even did a new batch today. So for my keg today, did a new batch. So everything in the bucket over here, which you probably can't see, is new again today. I'll probably sanitize 3 vessels with that, and in 2 weeks time, tip it, start again. So just because I need to get through those 2 bottles I found. And I can't believe it, you know? Can't believe I found 2 extra bottles. God, what an egghead. You know, you slap yourself sometimes because you buy so much stuff as a home brewer. You buy, oh, that's on sale, grab those hops, I grab that malt. I've got a bucket full of bloody specialty malts. You know, because I'm like, oh, I'll have that. I don't know what beer I'm going to brew, but they bloody sound like good malts. And then I'm looking at hops, I'm looking at hops, I'm like, oh God, that's on sale, get some of that. Next thing you know, you got a freezer full of hops, you got a bucket full of specialty malts, and you got a whole bunch of stuff going off or potentially going bad in your brewery, getting old and degrading. So, lesson learnt, got to watch those things. The beer is really good. Gonna brew this. Beautiful beer, highly recommended if you can get it. I got this from Dan Murphy's in Australia. Obviously, if you're not in Australia, you can't get it from Dan Murphy's. If you're in the UK and you live anywhere near Faversham, you could probably go and get this on cask, and it's probably a bloody nice beer on cask. So with that being said and everything else, it's probably more than 15 minutes. Again, I apologize. Till next time, cheers, happy brewing.